Hi everybody, Chris Pugh here. I wanted to just sort of touch base on some of this manual input alignment. I know I've made a couple of videos before, but I really wanted to try to get down into some comprehensive elements. Just a quick review on some findings on making sure the inputs all exit the console at the same time, doing that via the input stage based off of some external processing, and then also taking it a step further and looking at the effects returns and just sort of showing some findings there, and from there can probably make the decision whether or not that's the kind of thing you want to go back and align. Like, I'm going to do a couple of examples and kind of show you why I think it's probably the best thing to do, especially when you're, in my case, using it's I do this on both the Digico SD9 and the Waves LV1, looking at making this happen both on both of those desks. However, because of the process, it's actually easiest to show it on this desk because of just how some of the returns come back. And so hopefully that will kind of make more sense as we go a little further. So just quick recap on what I'm looking to do in order to actually take that measurement. So first off, we're going to have our noise channel, and in that case, for the routing of this particular input, it's going to be going straight to the measurement output matrix. So basically, straight from here to the output matrix that then goes into Smart here, and then we can see our little blue line. That is the measurement source. And then the reference is going to come from the inputs that we're actually going to run the noise through. You'll notice I have a couple selected there, one on this layer, and then a couple on this layer, and that'll kind of make sense a little later as we get down to why that is. Just one other note I wanted to bring up after a quick review and really sort of taking into account what I'm looking to compare here. I am going back, and all of the processing on these channels, it is in line, as in it is instantiated, but it is in, we do have it bypassed for the sake of being able to reference and see a clean phase trace and magnitude on our readout. And that's, again, that's going to come into play a little later on, being able to reference these things. So just a quick FYI, if you've gone into some other detail on some of the other videos as to how to do this, it's going to be kind of a fast deal. And the other thing to note is in Smart, I have actually already delay located my longest path. It's the same longest path that I've always had on this, which is going to end up being my lead vocal. So I'm just going to go ahead and open that up. So now we have noise coming in, going straight to measurement, and then noise from the longest path lead vocal channel going over to the reference. Then we have those two correlating here. And you'll notice that we actually do have flat magnitude, decently flat phase trace. Just to explain a little bit of what's going on there, this is actually there's some real analog gear with some with a couple of pieces that are actually in line with that. Their actual function is bypassed. However, they do physically exist, so that's where we're seeing a little bit of variance on that. However, when we look to say compare that, I'm going to compare it to another input that's also aligned. So there's a background vocal channel there, and you can see we're essentially very, very flat on the phase trace, very flat magnitude response. So going back for just a moment, I'm going to take that channel out. I'm going to bring the lead vocal back in, and then take that away. Open up the backing vocal channel. Again, you see we are aligned there. In order to get there, we actually had to take that backing vocal channel and line it up. We had to take it and actually delay it. In this case, Not very much. I've really tried to do as much as I can to try to speed up my overall process and keep the latent paths in between inputs as low as possible. So we're really, I mean, that's we're at less than a millisecond to actually keep less than a millisecond of difference there to keep those in line. Just for reference, while we're still on this piece here, let me just take a look at another input. This is another input in comparison. You know, a little longer there, probably just not as much going on as far as routing. So we're at what 2.46 milliseconds to keep that one in line. And then, but if I open that up and then again look over here in Smart, again, we're going to see that it does. We are in line. The comparison, because we've already delay located, is the relationship is very nice there. Just a quick comparison while this noise is happening. I'm just going to go in and turn that delay off and show you what it looks like without anything whatsoever. So obviously we see phase wraps all over the place. Magnitude's going to pretty much stay the same. Very similar, a little bit of destructive stuff going on there in the very HF, but obviously phase relationship. We can physically see that happening there. Delays back in, and then we're lined up again. Okay, so that's the process for looking at that. The overall process is basically to take that, identify your longest source, and then go through and assign that noise generator all the inputs at the actual front end of the channel strip, and compare them. And after you've identified that longest path, and then go back and line everything up, keeping the same assigned busing, keeping any of your server processing buffer settings for the instance of waves units. That's going to be in Super Rack. That's going to be located right here. So if that changes, we have to take another look at the overall alignment because all these things are based off of the electronic and digital devices having the same settings as we move forward. So, okay, there we go on basic overview, and also just with that notation piece that notation that I am bypassing all the processing, all high-pass filters, all EQs, all dynamics, and things like that in order to any type of anything that would be there. However, it's physically in circuit. It's just not actually affecting the sound. So, all right, next steps. So that when we're actually opening those channels up, what we were doing is allowing them to go through so they're at the input stage, they go through their respective groups, and then out the master bus, and then driving the matrix. I have the matrix section on the console over on this side, so you can see these are what I would normally use to drive a PA, some zones. And then these last two, Matrix 7 and 8, that's what I'm using in this case to actually do those measurement and reference sources for the actual transport in and out of Smart. So, next step is if once we're here at this point, all of our inputs should be exiting the console at the same time, respectively, based off of all that. Now, the question then becomes when we have, obviously mixing music and things like that, we're going to have reverbs and things of that sort that we're going to be bringing in and out song per song, and levels changing, and that's basically we're looking at the art of mixing at this point. So the question becomes, because there are time components with these multi-effects, there are also, there's convolution and reverbs and all this. So the question then is, do we need to take that a step further and actually align those? So I'm going to do a quick demonstration to sort of make that judgment. So I'm going to keep I'm just going to open up, for instance, I'm going to open up right now. These are all my effects returns. I have them down and they are aligned. So I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take just the lead vocal verb. And right now you're hearing it routed through all of its group processing into the matrix, and obviously we're reading it here. We're reading our flat, phase trace, and smart. I don't know how audible this is going to be, but just going back for a second, I'm going to go over here, and right now we're hearing the actual input source through the desk, and I'm just going to, I took the delay off of this. I'm just going to bring this in and see if we can actually hear any comb filtering. Not quite sure how that translates to you guys, but to my ears, that is pretty obvious. And then let's just take a quick look at what happened in Smart. So obviously we see we have some variance happening, and a bit of comb filtering taking place in the top end. So in this case, if I remember correctly, it actually didn't take too much to get that in alignment as far as the actual amount of delayed time. Let's actually take a look at what it was for a moment. Yeah, it's far less than a millisecond. We're probably talking about a quarter of a millisecond there. But let's just take a look at one here. That so that's a reverb processor that's actually completely outside of the Waves ecosystem. That's a Universal Audio reverb unit. So with that channel having a fair bit of that channel has a fair bit of time. Obviously, that's the longest pass. So it's going to be taking some time to actually get out and back in through the desk. I was very, very close to basically having to decide whether I need to go and try to use another reverb unit, because it didn't take much. Now, I'm just gonna do another example and pull this. Let's see. I'm gonna pull. Sorry, I'm gonna take delay off of. Another, I'm going to take delay. I'm going to take delay off of another effect return. So this is the short delay, and I'm going to bring that in. Let's see what kind of results we get. Wow, lots and lots of audible comb filtering happening there. So let's take a look at it over here on the transfer function. And see, absolutely, we have lots and lots of comb filtering happening all the way down. So, I'm just going to keep panned over here to Smart for a second. I'm going to turn that delay back on that return. Pretty audible there to see what happens with cancellation versus summation. Now, going back to something I mentioned earlier, like I said, like the actual effects, dynamics, and all processing, they are in place. They are physically occupying the amount of time that they would take. However, they are bypassed. Especially when doing something like this, if you hear all that convolution or all those other time components, these things are really going to skew your results. So they're bypassed. However, bringing that in, so at this point in time, that is delay aligned. We hear that there's a reasonable summation. Turning it off, massive comb filtering. Okay, so. Quick break from the noise for a moment. So let's think about what we're doing there. So in my case, what we were listening to there was basically a listening example in order to try to actually hear that to decide whether or not we need to take that other step. And after hearing those elements in play, my decision was that that yes, I think I needed to go and take a look at that. So, how do we get there? And this is where things start to get, you start to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and just, you have to really, really sort of focus on what you're doing. Again, I know I've said it a few times before, processing bypassed. That means anything that you're going to be listening to for reference here needs to actually be, it needs to be instantiated where it is. However, it does need to be bypassed in order to be able to actually see this and get a consistent result. So a thought with doing this, when you're looking at when you're doing it at the input stage, what you would have done is your very first step is delay locate your longest path. So once that's done and all your inputs are done, you can actually move through and you can actually mute the inputs that you were once listening to, and you can go through and listen to individual effects returns and run them through the allow them to pass through their respective signal paths, and measure that and actually look and see how far they need to now go back, based off of the readings that you're getting on your transfer function. Because again, we've already delay located unless you're going back and having to re-delay locate anything. This is something that you can actually do. So at this point, you're not when we're here and listening to like this is now listening to the dry source coming through, and then there's the lead vocal verb with the comb filtering, because our delay is off. Turn it back on, and we have summation again. And then just verifying, pushing these up. These are all different lead vocal effects. So we've got just a reverb, a short delay, long delay, doubler, and then actually a flanger for a special effect here. So there we go. Again, we are looking at delaying the channel return here. So I'm going to take a look at another one. This is the background vocal reverb. Again, we are delay located here, so we have audible summation happening. You can physically see it happening here. However, turn that delay off. Audible cancellation. And so forth. Can kind of move around. So this is another input that happens to be driving another couple of this is the saxophone. So this happens to be driving a saxophone reverb and a saxophone delay. And as you can tell, as I'm bringing those up, we do have summation. Again, for demonstration purposes, summation, reverb, take that delay off. Lots and lots of audible cancellation. That one actually took a little bit longer to get in line. So that's why we have such a severe amount of cancellation versus summation here. And then really just kind of going through some of the same things. This is a snare top. So that's going to be driving non-linear reverb, a long snare, and then an actual special effect over here. So same thing. All right, and there we are. So keeping all of those, keeping all of those effects returns in line. Again, this is where I'm using external processing for not only dynamics, but I'm also using it for effects, and I'm using two different systems there. Some of the reverbs are waves, and that I'm running via Super Rack and the SoundGrid server. Some of them I'm utilizing that same patch system, but I'm actually sending and receiving and getting some of that information from my Universal Audio Live Rack device. So that's kind of where we're. That's one of the main reasons why I'm looking to do this again. Like anytime we have processes going out and in, you want to you really need to focus on trying to make sure those are all in alignment. And the only way to actually know it is actually creating positive summation there is to be able to take that measurement. It's pretty easy to hear in terms of pink noise, but but I can tell you from some experience as well, like listening to it with these particular sources, it's pretty audible with the actual live sources as well. When you actually start getting comb filtering in there, even with the time components of the delay modulation or the convolution taking place in the reverbs, because a component of that source is still there. So the signal is still being sent through that aux send and then coming back into the return. So again, while it may not be quite as noticeable as actually a pair of inputs being drastically out of phase with one another, it is something that needs to be addressed and looks to make sense in terms of doing that, doing it all in one. Doing it all in one sitting, so that way after you've delay located and done everything for your inputs, you can just move on to the next step. There are a couple of finer points here that I'm not going to quite go into, but all of the bases and covering everything as far as taking the measurements and being able to do that. I think everything I should have been able to, I believe I touched base on all of those elements. The other finer points here are really speaking to in terms of based off of if there are some very, very long, if there are some, let's say, reverb or delay units that take a lot of time, that you're going to incur a lot of latency in order to use those units. It may be something that actually is pushing things in time in such a way where it's going to lengthen that overall path. So from what I'm looking at here, based off of the overall amount of time that it's already taking in order to get through the system for my longest input, that's something that, you know, I've actually worked with it a bit and tried to I've chained a few analog devices together. I've taken a few inserts out of that particular channel path in order to really try to get that as fast as I possibly could. So when you use when you're using an engine that's actually it's going to take that path and extend it further out. It's a matter of you're going to have to now go back and take your input and move it further in order to get those things to line up. So I guess it is up for debate as to whether it is worthwhile to actually use a unit that is going to do that's going to take so long that you actually have to take your longest path input and then add even more time to it in order to actually get that. In my thought, like I think about kind of what that does to the overall structure of the alignment process. And in my opinion, I really don't think it's worth it. So if it's a matter of, you do have to sort of be intentional about what units you're selecting, and making sure that you're selecting ones that you can that you can actually keep in time, in order to make this happen. So it's a lot of information. I know I kind of breezed through a lot of it, just sort of in hopes that this may be a familiarity with being able to to have some pre-existing knowledge about some input alignment. And this is just kind of taking those inputs and then going through the effects returns, and doing the same thing, keeping that in line with that longest path, which for me is going to fall right here. So anyway, hope this all makes sense. If you do have any questions, please let me know, and I'll be happy to help and answer as much as I can. All right. Cheers, everybody.